In the dazzling heart of Tokyo's International Martial Arts Heritage Festival arena, a cocky young Taekwondo champion was about to make the worst mistake of his undefeated career. What started as a brash celebration of modern martial arts turned deadly serious when a living legend stepped out of the shadows and into the ring. Kai Matsuda wasn't your typical social media superstar. For 4 years, he'd been a Taekwondo phenomenon, lightning fast with 23 consecutive knockouts and a reputation for humiliating opponents in viral spectacles that redefined martial arts entertainment. When Kai publicly mocked traditional masters and challenged Steven Seagal as a Hollywood dinosaur from the retirement home era, he had no idea he was facing a 7-time world karate champion who once went 6 years without losing a single point in international competition. Seagal's calm acceptance, "You called, I've answered," would trigger a reckoning that shattered everything Kai thought he knew about fighting. What began as a publicity stunt would become a profound transformation. The global martial arts community would never be the same after witnessing youthful arrogance meet timeless mastery in the most humbling lesson ever broadcast live. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. In the dazzling heart of Tokyo's International Martial Arts Heritage Festival arena, a cocky young Taekwondo champion was about to make the worst mistake of his undefeated career. What started as a brash celebration of modern martial arts would turn deadly serious when a living legend stepped out of the shadows and into the ring. Kai Matsuda wasn't your typical social media superstar. For 4 years, he'd been a Taekwondo phenomenon, lightning fast with 23 consecutive knockouts and a reputation for humiliating opponents. Raised poor in Osaka, he'd become a global icon by turning tradition into spectacle. A brutal kick echoed across the arena, sending his exhibition opponent crashing to the mat. The crowd gasped as the referee dove in, checking if the man could even move. But Kai was already parading around, arms raised high, grin stretched wide. He strutted past the cameras, leaned over his opponent, and shouted taunts, loud, cocky, unapologetic. The Heritage Festival arena glittered like a futuristic temple, its soaring glass ceiling reflecting thousands of phone screens capturing every moment. Screens larger than billboards displayed Kai's victory in slow motion from every angle, the perfect spinning hook kick that had rendered his opponent unconscious. Some fans roared with excitement. Others exchanged uneasy glances. That's 23 straight wins, 23 knockouts for the Lightning, Kai Matsuda. Ken Nakamura's voice boomed through the arena speakers. The veteran commentator adjusted his glasses, expression carefully neutral. A spectacular finish, though perhaps lacking the restraint one might expect in a showcase meant to honor martial arts traditions. Kai couldn't care less about restraint. At 27, he was the face of modern Taekwondo, not the disciplined Olympic sport, but the flashy, social media-ready version that racked up millions of views. Tonight's Heritage Festival, billed as a celebration of martial arts from around the world, had become his personal highlight reel. Aiko Tanaka, Kai's manager, watched from just outside the ring, her expression a practiced mask of enthusiasm despite the knot forming in her stomach. She'd built Kai's brand from nothing, the orphan from Osaka who fought his way to international fame. But lately, she struggled to recognize the humble fighter she'd discovered 4 years ago. "Another one down," Kai shouted, snatching the mic from the announcer. Sweat glistened on his sculpted frame as he paced the mat, drinking in the crowd's reaction. "Is there nobody who can challenge me?" "Nobody at all." Aiko winced. This wasn't part of the plan. The expo was supposed to be about respect, a chance to connect with sponsors who valued tradition. But Kai was riding high on adrenaline and adoration. Behind the cameraman Genki Saito, phone held high, live streaming every moment to Kai's 3 million followers. The 24-year-old content creator's eyes gleamed with dollar signs as the viewer count climbed. "Keep going, Kai," he whispered urgently. "The numbers are insane." In the VIP section, several older masters shifted uncomfortably. Among them sat Master Hiroshi Watanabe, Kai's first teacher, a stern-faced man in his 70s whose eyes never left his former student. His expression was unreadable, but those who knew him could see the disappointment etched in the lines around his eyes. You know what's wrong with martial arts today? Kai continued, voice echoing through the arena as he spun in a circle, playing to the cameras. Too much bowing, too much philosophy, not enough reality. Ken Nakamura cleared his throat, attempting to redirect. Kai Matsuda, ladies and gentlemen, bringing his unique energy to tonight's proceedings, I challenge any of them. Kai interrupted, pointing toward the dignitary section. Any old-school fighter who thinks their ancient ways still work. Step up. Let's see what your tradition does against my reality. The crowd's reaction split. Younger fans cheering wildly, others falling silent. Mina stepped closer to the ring, making a cutting motion across her throat. Enough, her eyes pleaded. Kai saw it, ignored it. In fact, he continued, eyes gleaming with mischief. I've got a special invitation. They say Steven Seagal is the greatest martial artist ever. He made air quotes around greatest. 6 world titles back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Even those who didn't follow martial arts knew Steven Seagal, the action star, the internet meme, the legend. Well, Mr. Seagal, Kai's grin widened. If you're watching this from your retirement home, I'd be happy to show you how real fighting has evolved since your day. No disrespect, but facts are facts. Your generation couldn't handle what we do now. Aiko closed her eyes briefly. This was going too far. Steven Seagal was in his 70s now, long past his prime. Even as a publicity stunt, this crossed a line. Kai basked in the mixed reaction, feeding off both cheers and uncomfortable silence. Anyone else feel like I'm being unfair? Maybe I should pick on someone my own age. He paused for effect. Sorry, but greatness doesn't make excuses. If your style is so perfect, prove it works against me. Ken Nakamura leaned into his microphone, his voice softer now, almost reverent. Interesting timing for such a challenge. Many viewers may not know that Steven Seagal is actually. A commotion at the back of the arena interrupted him. Heads turned, whispers spread like wildfire. Kai, still riding high on his moment, didn't notice immediately. He continued pacing, pointing to his undefeated record displayed on the big screen. 23-0. 23 knockouts. Who's next? Who wants? The crowd's murmur grew louder. Phone cameras shifted away from Kai toward the entrance. Kai finally paused, annoyed at losing the spotlight. What's everyone looking at? Then he saw it too. Near the main entrance, a small space had cleared around a solitary figure. An older man with a neatly trimmed beard, dressed in simple black pants and a fitted dark blue shirt. Nothing flashy, no entourage, just quiet presence. Even from a distance, the man's posture commanded respect. Shoulders straight but relaxed, hands loose at his sides, expression calm and focused. Is that? Kai squinted against the lights. Ken Nakamura's voice returned, trembling slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we have an unexpected guest. The arena fell into an electric hush as the figure moved through the crowd with purposeful calm. Kai's bravado faltered for just a moment. Something about the man's presence felt different from the usual martial arts personalities who attended these events. This wasn't someone seeking attention or playing to cameras. Genki frantically adjusted his phone's zoom, trying to capture the approaching figure. This is pure gold, he whispered to himself, viewer count exploding as words spread across social media. The hashtag Kai vs. Seagal was already trending. Ladies and gentlemen, Ken Nakamura's voice carried a weight that silenced even the most excited spectators. Approaching the arena floor is Steven Seagal, 7-time world karate champion, 7th Dan black belt in Aikido, and yes, for those who remember, a man who once went 6 years without losing a single point in international competition. Kai's cocky grin wavered. That wasn't the introduction he'd expected. 6 years without losing a point? That was the kind of record that belonged to legends, not Hollywood actors. Aiko rushed to Kai's side, her face pale. Kai, we need to walk this back. Right now? This isn't a game anymore. Walk what back? Kai's voice carried less conviction than before, but he couldn't back down now, not with millions watching. He's like 70 years old. Aiko, I'm in my prime. Age is just a number to masters like him, she hissed. You think technique disappears with gray hair? Master Watanabe rose from his seat in the VIP section, his weathered hands gripping the railing. He'd seen this before, young fighters who confused flash with substance, who mistook viral moments for martial mastery. But he'd never seen it happen to one of his own students on such a public stage. Steven Seagal reached the edge of the ring area and stopped. He didn't climb through the ropes or make any dramatic gestures. He simply stood there, dark eyes studying Kai with the patience of someone who had seen countless young fighters burn bright and fast. "You called," Seagal said, his voice carrying clearly through the arena despite speaking barely above conversational volume. "I've answered." The simplicity of the statement sent chills through the crowd. No posturing, no threats, no showmanship. Just acknowledgement and acceptance. Kai felt his throat tighten. This wasn't going according to script. Where was the banter? The trash talk? The entertainment value that made for good social media content? Kai cleared his throat, forcing his cocky grin back into place. "I mean, I didn't think you'd actually show up. Respect for stepping into my domain, Grandpa." The word grandpa fell flat in the sudden silence. Several audience members actually winced. Seagal's expression didn't change. "Your domain." He glanced around the arena, taking in the flashing lights, the giant screens, the social media circus. "This is a martial arts festival. Martial arts belongs to no one, and to everyone who approaches it with proper respect." Right, Kai said, starting to pace again, trying to reclaim his energy. "But let's be real here. You're what, 72? 73? I'm 27, undefeated, at the absolute peak of human performance. This isn't exactly a fair fight." "You're right," Seagal said calmly. "It isn't fair." The crowd stirred. Kai's grin returned, thinking he'd won the psychological battle. "But not for the reasons you think," Seagal continued. "You're fighting. For cameras, for fame, for the approval of strangers. I fought to understand the art itself. We're not even participating in the same activity." Ken Nakamura leaned forward in his commentary booth. "For those just joining us, what we're witnessing is unprecedented. Steven Seagal, who hasn't fought publicly in over 2 decades, has accepted a challenge from Kai Matsuda, one of the most dominant Taekwondo fighters of the current generation." Aiko grabbed Kai's arm. "The insurance alone will kill us. The liability waivers haven't been signed. The festival organizers never approved this. What we need," Kai said, pulling free, "is to give the people what they want to see." He turned back to Seagal. "So what do you say, old man? You up for showing everyone what those ancient techniques can do against modern martial arts?" Seagal looked at him for a long moment. "Ancient techniques," he repeated slowly. "You think physics has changed? You think the human body operates differently now than it did 50 years ago? I think training methods have evolved. I think athletes are stronger, faster, more technical than they've ever been. You think a lot," Seagal interrupted gently. "But thinking and knowing are different things." Master Watanabe watched the exchange with growing concern. He recognized the look in Seagal's eyes, the same look he'd seen in the eyes of masters who'd reached the point where teaching became more important than ego. "Are you accepting my challenge or not?" Kai demanded, his voice carrying an edge of desperation. The longer this went on, the more his confident narrative was slipping away. Seagal nodded once. "I accept." The arena erupted. Phones flashed, social media exploded, and commentators around the world scrambled to provide context for what was about to unfold. "But," Seagal continued, his voice somehow cutting through the noise, "this isn't a challenge. This is a lesson." The festival organizers scrambled into action, their carefully planned evening dissolving into chaos. What had been a celebration of martial arts heritage was rapidly becoming the most talked-about fighting event of the decade. Insurance representatives huddled in urgent phone calls while medical staff positioned themselves ringside. Kai bounced, on his toes, trying to maintain his adrenaline high, but something felt different now. The crowd's energy had shifted from excitement to something deeper, anticipation mixed with reverence. They weren't just watching a fight, they were witnessing history. "This is insane," Jenki muttered, live streaming frantically to his 3 different platforms. "Views are going crazy. Every major sports channel is picking up the feed." Aiko paced behind the ring barriers, her phone buzzing with calls from sponsors, lawyers, and reporters. "Kai," she called out, "we can still walk away from this. Say you were just promoting the festival, building hype. Walk away." Kai laughed, but it sounded hollow. "In front of 3 million people? Are you nuts?" Steven Seagal had moved to a quiet corner, stretching with deliberate, flowing movements. Nothing flashy, just the methodical preparation of someone who understood his body completely. Each stretch flowed into the next, a continuous demonstration of balance and control. Master Watanabe descended from the VIP section, his face grave. He approached Seagal, bowing deeply. The two men spoke in quiet tones, their conversation inaudible over the crowd noise. Ken Nakamura's voice carried over the speakers. What many spectators may not realize is that Steven Seagal's competitive record is nearly mythical. 6 consecutive World Karate Championships in the 1970s, with a technical precision that was considered revolutionary for its time. He didn't just win, he dominated through pure technique. Kai's confidence flickered. Revolutionary technique. He'd studied every fighter from every era. How had he missed this? Furthermore, Ken continued, Seagal's Aikido mastery is equally impressive. 7th Dan black belt, trained directly under some of Japan's most respected masters. His understanding of timing, distance, and leverage is considered textbook perfect. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The ring was hastily configured with additional safety equipment. Referees conferred nervously. How do you officiate a match between a social media superstar and a living legend? Seagal finished his stretching and walked to the ring's edge. He looked at Kai with an expression that wasn't hostile or competitive. It was almost paternal. Last chance to reconsider, Seagal said quietly. There's no shame in recognizing when you're out of your depth. Kai's jaw tightened. You're trying to psych me out. It won't work. I'm trying to save you from embarrassment, Seagal replied. But if you insist on learning the hard way. He stepped through the ropes with fluid grace, despite his age. No dramatic entrance, no showboating. Just the economical movement of someone who never wasted energy on unnecessary gestures. The crowd noise reached a crescendo as both men stood in the center of the ring. The contrast was stark. Kai in his designer fighting gear, muscles pumped and gleaming under the lights, versus Seagal in simple black GI pants and a plain shirt, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Gentlemen, the referee began, his voice shaky. This is an exhibition match. First to 3 points or no points, Seagal said calmly. No time limits. We'll know when it's over. Kai nodded, trying to project confidence. Fine by me. Won't take long anyway. The referee looked between them, clearly out of his depth. Begin when ready. Master Watanabe caught Kai's eye from ringside. For a moment, the older man's expression softened, and Kai saw something that made his stomach clench. Not anger, but profound sadness. His first teacher looked like he was watching a student about to make a terrible mistake. Kai shook it off. This was his moment. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd built, came down to this. He couldn't let doubt creep in now. You ready, old man? He called out, settling into his fighting stance. Seagal didn't assume any recognizable stance. He simply stood naturally, hands at his sides, weight evenly distributed. To the untrained. He looked completely unprepared. I've been ready for 50 years, Seagal replied. The arena held its breath. Cameras zoomed in from every angle. Social media feeds crashed from the traffic. Around the world, martial artists stopped what they were doing to watch. Kai took a deep breath, feeling the familiar rush of pre-fight. Adrenaline. This was it, the moment that would define his legacy. He'd either cement his status as the greatest martial artist of his generation, or he pushed that thought away. There was no or. There was only victory. The two men faced each other in the center of the ring, and the entire martial arts world watched to see what would happen when youthful arrogance met timeless mastery. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Kai bounced lightly, on his toes, his signature pre-fight rhythm, while Seagal remained perfectly still, not rigid, but relaxed in the way only true masters achieve. The contrast was striking. Kinetic energy versus serene composure. Kai threw the first technique, a lightning-fast probe, a quick front kick designed to test distance and reactions. In his countless victories, this simple opener usually revealed everything he needed to know about an opponent. Seagal moved barely 6 inches, a subtle shift that made Kai's kick miss by the narrowest margin. It looked effortless, like he'd simply stepped out of the way of a falling leaf. Interesting, Ken Nakamura observed from his commentary position. Seagal's evasion demonstrates perfect MAI, the proper fighting distance. He's not moving away from the attack, he's moving to where the attack isn't. Kai reset, frowning slightly. Lucky dodge. He threw a combination, jab, cross, high kick, the kind of fluid sequence that had highlighted reels across social media. Fast, technical, devastating. Seagal's response was subtle and devastating. He didn't block the punches so much as redirect them, using minimal movements to guide Kai's attacks past their target. When the high kick came, Seagal ducked under it with a smooth, flowing motion that put him in perfect position for a counterattack. But he didn't attack. He simply returned to his natural stance, watching. What the hell? Kai muttered, circling. To his left. His combinations were hitting nothing but air, and Seagal wasn't even breathing hard. Jenki's camera captured every angle, his commentary breathless with excitement. Guys, this is insane. Kai's throwing everything at him, and it's like Seagal's reading the future. Kai launched into his signature sequence, the same spinning hook-kick combination that had knocked out his last 5 opponents. It was poetry in motion, a perfect blend of speed, power, and timing. The crowd gasped as his leg whipped through the air with devastating force. Seagal's counter was so subtle that most spectators missed it entirely. As Kai spun, committed to his technique, Seagal stepped forward, not back, forward, closing the distance and disrupting the kick's power. His hand rose, palm open, and made contact with Kai's chest just as the young fighter completed his spin. The contact looked gentle, almost casual. But Kai stumbled backward, his balance completely destroyed, arms windmilling as he fought to stay upright. Unbelievable. Ken's voice rose with genuine amazement. That's classic Aikido principle, using the opponent's force against them. Seagal didn't absorb the attack or deflect it. He redirected Kai's own momentum. Kai's face flushed red. He'd been humiliated in front of millions, made to look like an amateur by an old man who barely seemed to be trying. Lucky shot, Kai growled, but his voice lacked conviction. Master Watanabe leaned forward in his seat, his expression grim. He'd seen this before, the moment when a student's confidence cracked and desperation took over. It was the most dangerous moment in any fighter's career. Kai attacked with renewed fury, throwing everything in his arsenal. Flying knees, spinning, back kicks, boxing combinations, grappling attempts. He unleashed 4 years of professional fighting experience in a relentless barrage. And Seagal handled it all with the same serene composure. He slipped punches by millimeters, redirected kicks with open palms, and controlled distance with footwork so precise it seemed choreographed. Each of Kai's attacks was neutralized not through force, but through perfect timing and positioning. This is a masterclass in traditional martial arts, Ken announced, his voice filled with reverence. Seagal is demonstrating that technique, properly applied, transcends age and physical attributes. He's not fighting Kai, he's teaching him. Aiko watched from ringside, her hands clenched into fists. She'd seen Kai dominate the best fighters in the world, but this was different. This wasn't even a fight. It was a gentle but devastating exposure of everything Kai didn't understand about martial arts. Kai's breathing became labored. His attacks grew wilder, more desperate. Sweat poured down his face as he threw technique after technique, only to have them all neutralized by movements so economical they seemed effortless. Finally, Kai committed to his most powerful technique, a jumping spinning heel kick that had knocked out 3 opponents in the first round. He launched himself into the air, leg extended, putting everything he had into one final devastating attack. Seagal stepped in. It was the same movement he'd used before, but this time he committed fully. As Kai spun in midair, completely exposed, and committed to his attack, Seagal moved forward and up, his palm finding the center of Kai's chest. The contact was firm but controlled, not a strike meant to injure, but a push that completely disrupted Kai's landing. The young fighter crashed to the mat, rolling awkwardly before coming to rest flat on his back, staring up at the bright arena. Lights. Silence fell over the arena like a blanket. Seagal stood over him, not in triumph, but with genuine concern. He extended his hand. Are you hurt? Kai stared at the offered hand, his mind reeling. In 30 seconds of actual engagement, He'd been completely outclassed by a man old enough to be his grandfather. Every technique he'd thrown, techniques that had made him famous, that had earned him millions of dollars, had been casually, almost effortlessly neutralized. The crowd began to murmur, unsure how to react. This wasn't the explosive knockout they'd expected. It was something far more profound and unsettling. A complete deconstruction of everything they thought they knew about fighting. Kai slowly sat up, ignoring Seagal's extended hand. His designer fighting gear was scuffed, his carefully styled hair disheveled. But the real damage was to his confidence, his identity, his entire understanding of what it meant to be a martial artist. He looked up at Seagal, who was watching him with an expression of infinite patience. How? Kai whispered. Seagal's answer was simple, 50 years of practice. And you've just learned the first lesson, there's always more to learn. The arena remained eerily quiet as Kai slowly got to his feet, waving off the referee's concerned approach. His legs felt unsteady, not from physical damage, but from the complete shattering of his worldview. In 4 years of professional fighting, he'd never been so thoroughly outclassed. Steven Seagal stepped back, giving Kai space to recover. There was no gloating in his expression, no triumphant posturing for the cameras. If anything, he looked almost apologetic, like a teacher who'd been forced to deliver a harsh but necessary lesson. The exhibition is concluded, Seagal announced, simply addressing the crowd rather than Kai. Thank you for your time. He turned toward the ropes, ready to leave as quietly as he'd arrived. But Kai's voice stopped him. Wait. The word came out hoarse, barely audible. Kai cleared his throat and tried again. That's it. You're just done? Seagal paused, looking back with those calm, dark eyes. What more did you expect? I expected. Kai struggled to find words. I expected a fight. A real fight. That was real, Seagal replied. Perhaps more real than you're used to. The crowd began to murmur as the implications sank in. Social media exploded with conflicting reactions, some calling it anticlimactic, others recognizing they'd witnessed something profound. The hashtag not even a fight began trending alongside hashtag Seagal School. Ken Nakamura's commentary filled the silence. Ladies and gentlemen, what we've just witnessed is a masterclass in the difference between martial arts as sport and martial arts as art. Steven Seagal didn't defeat Kai Matsuda. He revealed the gap in understanding between showmanship and true mastery. Backstage, Aiko rushed to Kai's side as he finally exited the ring. His designer gear was barely wrinkled, his body unmarked, but his eyes held a hollow look she'd never seen before. Kai, are you okay? She asked, her voice soft with genuine concern. I'm fine, he said automatically, but his hands were shaking. Slightly. Just give me a minute. Genki approached with his phone still recording, his expression confused. Dude, that wasn't what we needed. There was no knockout, no big moment. The views are crazy, but the comments are all over the place. Some people are saying you got schooled, others are saying nothing happened. Kai looked at him with something approaching disgust. Nothing happened? Nothing happened? I mean, you didn't get hurt or anything. Maybe we can spin this as, get that camera out of my face, Kai said quietly, but with an edge that made Genki step back. Across the backstage area, Master Watanabe approached slowly. The old man's weathered face carried no judgment, only deep sadness. When their eyes met, Kai felt something crack inside his chest, not his ribs, but something deeper. Master, Kai began, then stopped. What could he say? How could he explain? Watanabe bowed slightly, a gesture that somehow felt like both forgiveness and farewell. The student must be ready to learn before the teacher can teach, he said simply. Tonight, you were not ready. The words hit harder than any physical blow. Kai watched his first teacher walk away, joining the group of traditional masters who were quietly filing out of the arena. Their silence spoke volumes. Ken Nakamura appeared at Kai's side, his press badge giving him backstage access. That was extraordinary, he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. In 30 years of covering martial arts, I've never seen anything quite like it. Seen what? Kai asked bitterly. An old man embarrassing a young fighter? I saw a master demonstrating that true skill transcends age, strength, and flash, Ken replied. Steven Seagal didn't humiliate you, Kai. He revealed that there are levels to this art you haven't even imagined yet. Kai's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. Sponsors, reporters, fans, critics, everyone wanted a piece of the story. But for the first time in years, he didn't care about the numbers. The views, the social media reaction. He barely touched me. Kai said, more to himself than to Ken. How is that possible? Because he didn't need to, Ken replied. That's what mastery looks like. Achieving maximum effect with minimum effort. Every movement he made served a purpose. Every technique you threw was anticipated, redirected, neutralized. Aiko rejoined them, her face pale from fielding calls. The sponsors are concerned, she said carefully. They want to know how we're going to handle the narrative. Some are talking about damage control. For the first time, Kai looked at his manager, really looked at her. He saw the stress lines around her eyes, the way she held her phone like a weapon, the careful way she spoke about his career as if it were made of glass. What narrative? He asked. What happened? I got schooled by a better fighter. Aiko blinked in surprise. In 4 years, she'd never heard him admit to being inferior to anyone. But maybe, Kai continued, his voice growing stronger. Maybe that's not the worst thing that could happen to me. 3 days later, Kai stood outside Master Watanabe's traditional dojo in the quiet backstreets of Tokyo. The building was humble, nothing like the gleaming gyms and high-tech training facilities he'd grown accustomed to. Just weathered wood, paper screens, and the soft sound of students practicing forms inside. He'd spent those 3 days in his apartment, ignoring calls from sponsors and reporters, watching the footage of his encounter with Seagal over and over. Each viewing revealed new layers of his own inadequacy, how telegraphed his attacks were, how he relied on power over precision, how his showboating had replaced substance. The social media reaction had been brutal and enlightening in equal measure. Half his followers were demanding he redeem himself with another fight. The other half were posting clips of traditional martial artists, asking why modern fighters had abandoned the deeper aspects of the art. Kai took a deep breath and slid open the dojo door. The interior was exactly as he remembered from his youth. Simple, clean, focused entirely on training. Students in white GIs moved through kata with meditative precision. The air smelled of sweat, wood polish, and something indefinable that spoke of decades of serious practice. Master Watanabe knelt at the front of the class, his back straight despite his age. He didn't acknowledge Kai's entrance, but his slight nod indicated he'd noticed. Kai waited until the class ended, watching his former teacher guide students through corrections with infinite patience. When the last student had bowed and left, Watanabe finally turned to face him. You look tired, the old man observed. I haven't been sleeping well, Kai admitted. I keep thinking about what happened. And what conclusion have you reached? Kai was quiet for a long moment. That everything I thought I knew about martial arts was wrong. Watanabe's expression softened slightly. Not wrong. Incomplete. I want to understand, Kai said, the words coming out in a rush. I want to know what Seagal knows, what you know. I want to learn what I missed. Learning requires humility, Watanabe replied. Are you prepared to be a beginner again? The question hung in the air. Kai thought about his sponsorship deals, his social media empire, his reputation as an undefeated champion. All of it built on a foundation that had crumbled in 30 seconds. Yes, he said finally. I think I am. Watanabe studied him for a long moment, then gestured to the training area. Show me your basic stance. Kai moved to the center of the mat and assumed his fighting position, the same stance that had served him through 23 victories. Watanabe circled him slowly, occasionally adjusting his posture with gentle touches. Your stance is designed for attack, Watanabe observed. But what about defense? What about balance? What about readiness for the unexpected? I've always been an aggressive fighter, Kai said. It's worked for me. Against other aggressive fighters, yes. But what happens when you face someone who doesn't fight your fight? Someone who makes you come to them. The lesson was simple but devastating. For the next hour, Watanabe had Kai practice nothing but stances, shifting weight, maintaining balance, understanding the subtle ways. Positioning affected every other aspect of combat. You fight with your ego, Watanabe said as Kai struggled with what should have been basic movements. Every technique is about proving your superiority. But what if fighting was about understanding? What if victory meant learning something new? About yourself? Kai's legs burned from holding unfamiliar positions. Sweat dripped onto the wooden floor as he tried to absorb concepts that should have been foundational but felt revolutionary. Seagal wasn't fighting me, was he? Kai asked during a brief rest. No, Watanabe confirmed. He was teaching you. Every movement you made gave him information. Every attack you threw showed him your limitations. He was conducting a diagnosis, not a battle. But why? Kai asked. Why would he do that? Watanabe's weathered face creased into something approaching a smile. Because that's what masters do. They teach, even when the student doesn't realize they're being taught. The training session ended with Kai flat on his back, exhausted from an hour of what most people would consider basic exercises. His social media notifications had gone silent. For the first time in years, he'd turned off his phone. Tomorrow, Watanabe said as Kai prepared to leave, we will practice breathing. Breathing? Kai couldn't hide his surprise. I know how to breathe. You know how to pant, how to gasp, how to hold your breath in tension, Watanabe corrected. But do you know how to breathe with purpose? How to use breath to control your mind, your body, your spirit? As Kai walked home through the quiet Tokyo streets, he realized he was looking forward to tomorrow's lesson. For the first time since his encounter with Seagal, he felt like he was moving towards something rather than running from something. His phone buzzed with a text from Aiko. Sponsors want to meet tomorrow. Big opportunities. Kai looked at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Tomorrow I'm learning how to breathe. Schedule them for next week. He turned off the phone and walked home in blessed silence. 2 weeks into his return to basics, Kai barely recognized himself. Gone were the designer training clothes, replaced by a simple white GI that bore the stains of honest sweat. His social media accounts lay dormant, managed by Aiko, who fielded increasingly frantic calls from sponsors wondering where their golden boy had disappeared to. Master Watanabe's dojo had become Kai's second home. Every morning at 6 a.m., he joined the regular students for meditation, basic forms, and fundamental techniques that he'd somehow skipped in his meteoric rise to fame. Your breathing is still shallow, Watanabe observed as Kai moved through a simple kata. You breathe like someone afraid of what comes next. Kai paused mid-form, suddenly aware of the tightness in his chest. How do you want me to breathe? Like someone who belongs here, Watanabe replied. Like someone who has nothing to prove and everything to learn. The other students, mostly younger practitioners, had initially been starstruck by Kai's presence. But as days passed and they watched him struggle with techniques they'd mastered years ago, the novelty wore off. Now they simply saw him as another student, albeit one with a lot of unlearning to do. Aiko appeared in the dojo doorway, her business attire looking absurdly out of place among the traditional surroundings. Watanabe nodded permission for her to enter. Kai, she said, her voice carrying a stress he'd never heard before. We need to talk. During the break, they sat outside the dojo on a wooden bench that had probably been there for decades. 3 sponsors have pulled out, Aiko said without preamble. They want their money back from the endorsement deals. Your social media engagement is down 60%. The festival organizers want to know if you're available for a rematch with Seagal. Kai absorbed this information with surprising calm. 2 weeks ago, it would have sent him into a panic. Now, it felt like someone else's problem. What do you think I should do? He asked. Aiko blinked in surprise. You're asking me? You've been managing my career for 4 years. You know this business better than anyone. What do you think? She was quiet for a long moment, watching the students practice through the dojo's open door. Honestly, I think you're the most centered I've ever seen you. But centered doesn't pay the bills. The bills will work themselves out, Kai said. What about you? Are you okay with this? With what? With me being nobody special. With me just being another student in a traditional dojo, learning things I should have learned years ago. Aiko studied his face, seeing something she'd never noticed before. Peace. Despite the financial crisis, despite the career uncertainty, despite the public humiliation, Kai looked more at ease than she'd ever seen him. I signed on to manage a fighter, she said slowly. But maybe I stayed because I believed in a person. If this is who you really are, then yeah, I'm okay with it. That afternoon, Watanabe introduced a new element to Kai's training, sparring, with the advanced students. But this wasn't the flashy, camera-ready combat Kai was used to. This was controlled, precise, educational. Your opponent is not your enemy. Watanabe explained as Kai faced a senior student named Takashi. Your opponent is your teacher. What can you learn from the way he moves? What can you discover about your own limitations? Asterisk. The sparring session was a revelation. Without the pressure to win, without the need to impress, Kai found himself actually listening to his body, responding to subtle cues he'd never noticed before. When Takashi landed a technique, Kai didn't get angry. He asked questions. How did you see that opening? Kai asked after being caught by a perfectly timed counterattack. You telegraph with your shoulders, Takashi explained. Every time you're about to attack, your left shoulder drops slightly. It's like you're announcing your intentions. This kind of detailed feedback had never been part of Kai's training regime. His previous coaches had focused on maximizing his natural abilities, not correcting his fundamental flaws. Genki showed up near the end of the session, camera in hand, ready to document Kai's comeback training for social media. But when he saw Kai moving with deliberate precision rather than explosive flash, his enthusiasm dimmed. This isn't really content, Genki complained to Aiko. Where's the intensity? The drama? The stuff that gets views? Maybe that's the point, Aiko replied, surprising herself with the answer. As the session ended, Kai bowed to his training partners with genuine gratitude. For the first time in years, he'd spent 2 hours focused entirely on learning rather than performing. Tomorrow, Watanabe announced, we will begin working on your timing. My timing? Kai asked. I thought my timing was pretty good. Your timing is adequate for overwhelming weaker opponents, Watanabe corrected. But what about opponents who cannot be overwhelmed? What about opponents who force you to be precise? As Kai changed out of his GI, he caught his reflection in the dojo's mirror. The face looking back at him was leaner, more focused, less concerned with appearance. He looked like a student again, hungry to learn rather than desperate to impress. His phone had 13 missed calls from reporters wanting comments on rumors about his breakdown. He deleted them all without listening and walked home through the peaceful Tokyo evening, already looking forward to tomorrow's lesson on timing. 3 weeks into his transformation, Kai was beginning to understand the difference between fighting and martial arts. His social media empire had crumbled, sponsorship deals had evaporated, and the martial arts world had largely written him off as a fallen star. But for the first time in years, he woke up excited about training rather than anxious about maintaining his image. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by hand to Master Watanabe's dojo. The envelope was simple, elegant, with no return address. Inside, written in precise handwriting, was an invitation that would change everything. Mr. Matsuda, your journey back to the beginning has been noted. If you are serious about understanding what you glimpsed in our brief encounter, you are welcome to train with me for 1 week. The dojo is private, the instruction intensive, and the commitment absolute. Consider carefully whether you are ready for what you might discover about yourself. S. Seagal. Kai read the letter 3 times, his hands trembling slightly. Master Watanabe, who had been watching quietly, approached and read it over his shoulder. This is unprecedented, Watanabe said softly. Steven Seagal hasn't taken private students in years. He must see something in your commitment, or he wants to finish humbling me. Kai replied, though without bitterness. Perhaps, Watanabe agreed. But perhaps that's exactly what you need. Aiko arrived an hour later, finding Kai still staring at the letter. Her business meetings with potential new clients had been going poorly. Apparently, representing a washed-up fighter wasn't a strong selling point. What's that? She asked, noticing the formal stationery. Kai handed her the letter. Her eyes widened as she read. This could be huge, she said, her marketing mind immediately spinning possibilities. A comeback story, exclusive training footage. Behind-the-scenes content with a legend. No cameras, Kai interrupted quietly. What? I said no cameras. No content. No social media. This isn't about rehabilitation or comeback narratives. This is about learning. Aiko sat down heavily on the dojo's wooden floor. Kai, we're hemorrhaging money. Your career is in freefall. This could be the perfect opportunity to rebuild your brand. What if I don't want to rebuild my brand? Kai asked. What if I want to build something else entirely? The question hung in the air between them. Aiko had spent 4 years crafting Kai's image, turning him into a marketable commodity. The idea of abandoning that felt like admitting failure. What would you build instead? She asked finally. I don't know yet, Kai admitted. But I know. It wouldn't be built on cameras and views and sponsored content. It would be built on understanding. Master Watanabe, who had been quietly observing their conversation, spoke up. The invitation includes a warning. Steven Seagal's training is not like what you've experienced here. He will push you to your breaking point and beyond. Are you prepared for that? Kai thought about his encounter with Seagal, how completely outclassed he'd felt. The idea of a week under that man's instruction was both terrifying and irresistible. I think I need to be broken, he said finally. I think I need to understand how little I actually know. That evening, Kai called the number included with the letter. Seagal's voice was exactly as he remembered, calm, measured, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. I received your letter, Kai said, and I accept. Whatever you're willing to teach me, I'm ready to learn. There was a long pause. We'll see. The dojo is in the mountains, 2 hours north of Tokyo. Come alone. Bring no technology, no distractions, no agenda beyond learning. Can you do that? Kai looked around his apartment, filled with trophies, sponsorship plaques, and reminders of his former glory. Yes, he said. I can do that. 1 week, Seagal continued. 7 days that will either teach you what you need to know or prove that you're not ready to know it. There's no shame in either outcome. After hanging up, Kai began packing a simple bag, basic clothes, toiletries, nothing else. Aiko watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable. This could be career suicide, she said quietly. Maybe, Kai agreed. Or maybe it's the beginning of something real. What should I tell the sponsors who are still taking meetings? Kai paused in his packing. Tell them that Kai Matsuda, the social media star, is taking a sabbatical, and that when he comes back, he might be someone completely different. The next morning, Master Watanabe walked him to the train station. The old man's blessing was wordless but profound, a deep bow that conveyed both respect and hope. As the train pulled away from Tokyo, carrying him toward the mountains and an uncertain future, Kai realized he wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time since his humiliation, he was moving toward something rather than running from something. He was going to learn what mastery actually meant. The mountain dojo was nothing like Kai had imagined. Hidden among ancient cedar trees 2 hours north of Tokyo, it was a structure that seemed to have grown from the earth itself, weathered wood and stone that spoke of decades of quiet practice, far from the noise of the modern world. Steven Seagal met him at the gravel pathway leading to the main building. No greeting, no small talk, just a nod toward a simple wooden structure that would serve as Kai's quarters for the week. Leave your belongings there, Seagal said. We begin immediately. The first shock was the complete absence of modern training equipment. No weights, no heavy bags, no mirrors or sound systems. Just open wooden floors, natural light filtering through paper screens, and the kind of silence that made every movement feel significant. Your first lesson, Seagal began, moving to the center of the training space, is to understand that everything you think you know about fighting is a limitation. For the next 4 hours, they worked on something Kai had never encountered. In his professional training, the art of doing nothing. Not meditation, not rest, but the active practice of complete stillness while remaining absolutely ready for anything. Your body is always preparing for the next move, Seagal observed, as Kai struggled to maintain perfect stillness. Your mind is always planning the next attack. But what if the next move is no move? What if perfect readiness means perfect emptiness? It was maddening. Kai's muscles, trained for explosive action, cramped from the effort of controlled non-action. His mind, accustomed to constant stimulation and feedback, struggled with the absence of immediate goals or measurable progress. This is impossible, Kai said after his third attempt at maintaining perfect stillness for 5 minutes. Impossible or unfamiliar? Seagal replied. Your training has been about accumulating techniques, building strength, developing speed. But what about subtraction? What about removing everything that isn't necessary? The afternoon brought a different kind of challenge. Seagal demonstrated basic Aikido principles, but not in the way Kai expected. Instead of learning throws or joint locks, Kai was taught to feel energy, to sense the subtle shifts in balance and intention that preceded any physical movement. Close your eyes, Seagal instructed, positioning himself arm's length away. Tell me when I'm about to move. The exercise seemed ridiculous at first. How could anyone predict movement without visual cues? But as the hours passed, something extraordinary began to happen. Kai started to sense tiny changes, shifts in breathing, micro-movements that preceded conscious action, even what felt like changes in the air itself. I can feel it, Kai whispered during one repetition, his eyes still closed. You're about to step forward with your left foot. Correct, Seagal confirmed. Now tell me, what did you feel? Kai struggled to put the sensation into words. It was like you changed the space around you before you actually moved. Like your intention created a ripple. Exactly. This is what you missed in our first encounter. I wasn't reacting to your movements. I was feeling your intentions before they became movements. That evening, as they sat in silence eating simple vegetarian meal, Kai finally asked the question that had been building all day. Why are you teaching me this? After I disrespected you, mocked everything you represent, why help me? Seagal was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. Because disrespect born from ignorance can be corrected. Disrespect born from arrogance rarely can. You've chosen to abandon your arrogance. That choice makes teaching possible. The second day focused on timing, not the explosive, overwhelming timing Kai was used to, but the subtle, patient timing of someone who understood rhythm at a deeper level. Your techniques are like trying to break down a door with a sledgehammer, Seagal explained as they moved through slow, controlled exercises. Effective, perhaps, but crude. What if instead you found the door's natural opening? What if you arrived at exactly the moment when resistance became impossible? They practiced this concept for hours. Seagal would throw slow, controlled attacks, and Kai would attempt to intercept them at precisely the right moment. Not too early, which would telegraph his intentions, and not too late, which would force him to use strength against strength. Feel the rhythm of my movement, Seagal instructed. Every technique has a beginning, middle, and end. Most fighters try to overwhelm the beginning or power through the middle. But what about the space between techniques? What about the moment when one movement ends and the next hasn't yet begun? It was like learning a completely new language. Kai's body, trained for aggressive forward pressure, had to discover the subtle art of yielding, redirecting, and finding openings that existed for mere fractions of seconds. The third day nearly broke him. Seagal introduced the concept of fighting without fighting, neutralizing aggression through perfect positioning and timing rather than counterattack. Your entire fighting philosophy is based on domination, Seagal observed as Kai struggled with exercises that required him to defend without ever striking back. But what if winning meant never having to fight at all? What if mastery was measured by conflicts avoided rather than opponents defeated? Kai found himself fighting tears of frustration. Everything he'd built his identity around, his speed, his power, his killer instinct, was being systematically deconstructed. He felt like a master craftsman being told his tools were useless. I don't understand the point, Kai said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. If I can't attack, if I can't use my strengths, then what am I? You're discovering what you are when you remove everything you think you are, Seagal replied. Strength can be trained, speed can be developed, techniques can be learned. But understanding, true understanding, can only be experienced. That night, Kai sat alone in his simple quarters, staring at his hands. These hands had knocked out 23 professional fighters. They'd earned him millions of dollars, international fame, and the adoration of millions of fans. But here, in this quiet mountain dojo, they felt clumsy and uncertain. The fourth and fifth days blurred together in a haze of subtle lessons and profound realizations. Seagal taught him to feel the difference between tension and readiness, between aggression and assertiveness, between confidence and arrogance. Watch, Seagal said during one memorable demonstration. He stood perfectly still while Kai attempted to push him off balance using full strength. No matter how hard Kai pushed, Seagal remained immovable, not through resistance, but through perfect structural alignment. You're not fighting my strength, Seagal explained. You're fighting the earth itself. My body is simply a conduit between your force and the ground beneath my feet. Then, with the gentlest touch, Seagal placed one finger against Kai's chest and sent him stumbling backward. This is the difference between technique and understanding, Seagal said. Technique can be copied, but understanding must be lived. On the sixth day, something shifted. Kai woke before dawn, not from anxiety or habit, but from genuine eagerness. To train, his body moved differently, still powerful, but with an economy of motion he'd never experienced. His mind was quieter, less focused on outcomes and more interested in process. During their morning session, Seagal attacked with increasing intensity, and for the first time, Kai found himself responding rather than reacting. His movements flowed from one to the next without the aggressive separation that had characterized his fighting before. Better, Seagal said simply, but the single word carried more weight than any championship trophy Kai had ever received. That afternoon, they engaged in what Seagal called free movement, unstructured interaction where both men simply responded to whatever arose naturally. There was no winning or losing, no attack or defense, just two martial artists exploring the space between them. Kai found himself moving in ways he'd never moved before. His body seemed to understand things his mind hadn't yet processed. When Seagal moved, Kai was already there, not to block or counter, but to maintain perfect balance in an ever-changing dynamic. "This is what you glimpsed in our first encounter," Seagal said as they finished the session. "Not my techniques, but my understanding. You felt what it was like to move in harmony with rather than opposition to what was happening." That evening, as they sat in comfortable silence watching the sun set over the mountains, Kai realized something profound had shifted inside him. The desperate need to prove himself, to dominate, to be seen as superior, all of it had simply evaporated. "I feel different," he said quietly. "You are different," Seagal confirmed. "The question is, what will you do with this difference?" Kai considered the question as stars began to appear in the clear mountain sky. Tomorrow he would return to Tokyo, to Aiko's anxious questions about his career, to sponsors demanding content and comeback narratives. But he would return as someone fundamentally changed. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I know it won't be what I was doing before." Seagal nodded. "That's the beginning of wisdom, knowing what you don't know and being comfortable with not knowing." The seventh day arrived with a sense of completion rather than ending. There were no final tests, no dramatic conclusions, just the quiet recognition that something important had been transmitted and received. "Remember," Seagal said as Kai prepared to leave, "mastery isn't about reaching a destination. It's about choosing to remain a student for the rest of your life." As the train carried him back toward Tokyo and an uncertain future, Kai carried with him something more valuable than any championship title: the deep, unshakable understanding that true strength came not from conquering others, but from mastering oneself. 6 months later, the martial arts world gathered once again in Tokyo for the Winter Heritage Festival. But this time, the atmosphere was different, more contemplative, less focused on spectacle. Word had spread about transformations happening in the traditional dojos, about young fighters rediscovering the deeper aspects of their art. Kai stood backstage, adjusting his simple white GI. No designer gear, no sponsor logos, no camera crew following his every move. Aiko stood beside him, her expression mixing pride with anxiety. "The audience is expecting something," she said quietly. "After everything that's happened, people want to see what you've become. They'll see what they see." Kai replied, his voice carrying a calm she'd never heard before. "I'm not performing tonight. I'm sharing." The months since his return from the mountains had been challenging in ways his previous career never was. Several major sponsors had cut ties completely, unwilling to associate with a fighter who refused to promote aggression or dominance. His social media following had dropped to a third of its former size, but the remaining followers were different, more engaged with substance than spectacle. Genki had initially struggled with the new direction, his content becoming contemplative rather than explosive. But gradually, he discovered something unexpected. There was an audience hungry for authenticity, for seeing the deeper aspects of martial arts explored rather than exploited. 5 minutes to your demonstration," a festival organizer announced. Kai nodded, then turned to Master Watanabe, who stood quietly in the corner. The old man's presence had become a constant source of strength over the past months as Kai rebuilt his relationship with traditional martial arts. "Are you ready?" Watanabe asked. "I don't think readiness is the point anymore," Kai replied. "I think presence is the point." They walked toward the stage together, not as star and manager, but as teacher and student preparing to share something genuine with the world. The arena was smaller than before, the atmosphere more intimate. Ken Nakamura handled the introduction with his characteristic warmth, but his words carried deeper meaning than typical fight promotion. Ladies and gentlemen, 6 months ago we witnessed an encounter that challenged our assumptions about martial arts, age, and mastery. Tonight, we see the continuation of that story, not as redemption or comeback, but as evolution. Kai entered the performance space with Master Watanabe, both men moving with the same deliberate grace. The audience fell silent, sensing something different about this presentation. What you're about to see, Ken continued, is a demonstration of traditional Taekwondo forms, performed as they were originally intended, not as athletic exhibition, but as moving meditation, as practical philosophy, as living art. The demonstration began with the simplest of movements, basic stances, fundamental blocks, elementary strikes, but performed with complete presence and understanding. These basic techniques revealed depths that flashy combinations could never touch. Kai moved through the forms with a fluidity that seemed to emerge from stillness itself. Every technique flowed naturally into the next, each movement containing both power and restraint, aggression and peace. Watching him, observers could see not just what he was doing, but why he was doing it. Master Watanabe joined him for the paired forms, and their interaction became a conversation in movement, old wisdom guiding new understanding, tradition, and innovation moving as one. This is extraordinary, Ken narrated softly. What we're seeing is the difference between martial arts as sport and martial arts as art. Every movement has purpose beyond scoring points or inflicting damage. In the audience, several young fighters watched with growing fascination. They'd come expecting flashy techniques and explosive demonstrations. Instead, they were seeing something that spoke to a deeper hunger, the desire to understand what they were doing rather than simply how to do it. As the demonstration concluded, Kai approached the microphone. The arena remained perfectly quiet, sensing that whatever he was about to say would be important. 6 months ago, I stood on a stage like this and challenged traditional martial arts. He began, his voice carrying clearly through the space. I thought I understood what strength was, what victory meant, what mastery looked like. He paused, looking out at the audience with genuine humility. I was wrong about everything. Strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about understanding yourself. Victory isn't about defeating opponents. It's about transcending the need to prove yourself. And mastery. He glanced back at Master Watanabe, then at an empty space where he imagined Seagal might be listening. Mastery is about becoming a student forever. The applause that followed was different from anything Kai had ever received. Not the explosive cheering of fans watching a knockout, but the deep appreciation of people who had witnessed something genuine and transformative. Backstage, reporters waited with their usual barrage of questions. But their inquiries felt different now, less focused on controversy and comeback narratives, more interested in understanding the philosophical transformation they'd witnessed. "What's next for your career?" one reporter asked. "I'm not sure. I have a career in the traditional sense anymore," Kai replied thoughtfully. "I have a practice. I have something to share." Whether that translates into a career depends on whether people are interested in depth rather than just spectacle. "Do you regret challenging Steven Seagal?" Kai smiled, the first genuinely peaceful smile many of them had ever seen from him. "That challenge was the best thing that ever happened to me. It showed me how much I didn't know, and it gave me the motivation to start learning for real." Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened. Young martial artists began seeking out traditional teachers, not to supplement their competitive training, but to understand the deeper aspects of their art. Dojos that had struggled to attract students found themselves with waiting lists. Kai established a small school in partnership with Master Watanabe. Not a commercial gym focused on producing champions, but a place where serious students could explore the intersection of traditional wisdom and contemporary application. Aiko's role evolved as well. Instead of managing a fighter's brand, she became an advocate for a movement, helping connect traditional teachers with students hungry for authenticity, facilitating workshops that explored martial arts as philosophy rather than just physical activity. "The sponsors still want you back," she mentioned during one of their weekly planning meetings. "Some sponsors," Kai corrected. "The ones who understand what we're doing now are more interested than ever. They're just different sponsors," companies that value substance over sensation. Genki's content had evolved dramatically as well. His videos now featured long-form conversations with masters, detailed breakdowns of classical techniques, and thoughtful explorations of martial arts philosophy. His audience was smaller but more engaged, and his content was being shared in martial arts communities around the world. One evening, as Kai finished teaching a class on the practical applications of traditional forms, he found a familiar envelope waiting in his office. The same elegant handwriting, the same quality paper. Your students show promise, the letter read. More importantly, they show understanding. This is what teaching should produce. Not copies of the teacher, but individuals who have learned to think for themselves. You have remembered what you forgot, and now you are helping others remember what they never knew they had lost. SS. Kai smiled, carefully folding the letter and placing it in his desk drawer next to his old championship belts. Artifacts of a previous life that now served mainly as reminders of how much he'd grown. 6 months later, at the Spring Heritage Festival, Kai sat in the audience rather than performing on stage. He watched young martial artists from various disciplines demonstrating their arts with the kind of depth and understanding that had once seemed lost to the social media age. "Look at that," Aiko whispered, pointing to a young kickboxer whose demonstration emphasized control and precision over power and flash. "That's what started with you." "That's what started with humility," Kai corrected. "I just happened to learn it publicly." Master Watanabe, now in his 70s but still teaching daily, leaned over with a satisfied expression. Students teaching students. This is how traditions survive. As the festival concluded, Kai walked home through the peaceful Tokyo streets, his mind quiet and content. Tomorrow he would wake before dawn, practice his forms in the small garden behind his apartment, then spend the day teaching students who came not to learn how to fight, but to understand why fighting had ever been necessary in the first place. His phone buzzed with a notification. His latest video, a simple demonstration of breathing techniques, had reached 1 million views. But for the first time in his adult life, the numbers didn't matter. What mattered was the comment he'd received from a young fighter in Brazil. "This changed how I think about everything. Thank you for showing us what mastery really looks like." Kai smiled, turned off his phone, and walked home in grateful silence. No longer a champion seeking glory, but a student who had finally learned what it meant to be teachable. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.